Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Calls. This is the 2024 Wells Fargo Data Dive Show. Got a lot to get into. We've got a forecast to look at. We're going to look at the prior leaderboards from Quail Hollow, figure out what metrics play best at this course, and the players in the field this week who excel at those metrics. A lot of things to cover. I'm excited, so let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. It's going to make you a much smarter golf gambler and a much better golf DFS player. Go check out fantasynational.com. You will not regret it. In the description of the video, there are links to all of the social media. First off, my X and Instagram, where earlier today I posted some research around the past 4 winners of the Wells Fargo Championship when it is held at Quail Hollow. We talked about this a lot last night, but 2022, 2020, and 2017 was not held at Quail Hollow, so only 4 past champions to dig into since a major renovation, which I'll get into here momentarily. But I posted some research around the previous champions, or the past 4 champions of the Wells Fargo at Quail Hollow, some of the patterns that those players exuded coming into the tournament, and the players in the field this week who fit the same criteria. So if you want to see the weekly research that I do on the PGA Tour, then give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I place my weekly betting cards and my top player usage in the DFS contests that I play. Those come out every Wednesday evening after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see those pieces of information, give me a follow over at X as well. And then lastly, for social media, Gabe's handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe. It's a great way to start your week of preparation, and he continues to update you throughout the week with his own version of recent form and course history. And it is a special thanks to Gabe for correcting me from last night's show that indeed the last major renovation of Quail Hollow did in fact happen in 2016. I believe I mentioned last night that it was in 2013. So thanks to Gabe for correcting me on that. That way I can provide you all with the most accurate information. So not only are you getting a lot of good data from Gabe, he's got a lot of course knowledge as well. So go check out Gabe, follow him over on social media, and subscribe to that article. It is free to do, by the way. And then lastly, we are live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. Did you fire off any wagers today for the Wells Fargo? Have you checked out the pricing for the players? Who are you looking to early on in your research this week? All of that good stuff. And there's been a field change as well. So we have a lot to do. Let's get into it. Let's dig into the weeds of the data for the 2024 Wells Fargo Championship. And we start with the forecast, I will call the extended forecast, not the super forecast, for Charlotte and the Quail Hollow area. Good evening, Awaken. A tad bit early, good deal. It's good to see you in chat. Hopefully you have done well, and that your Byron Nelson was much better than mine. Did not see you in chat last night, but my Byron Nelson was very, very poor. Was pretty much all in on Peter Quest and Kevin Yu, Ryan Palmer. All 3 of them missed the cut. So when you are focused on those players and they miss the cut, it's not going to be a good week, and such it was not a good week for me. Hopefully you had more success than I did, and I'm going to try and build some momentum this week, a double tournament week. But, of course, the main tournament being the Wells Fargo. Before I forget, I'll just make a single entry had Sungjae. Yeah, that sounds like you had about as good of a week as I did then. So we're going to try and turn it around, build some momentum heading into the PGA next week. Before I forget, and I'll get into it more here in a little bit, but Ludwig Aubert is not playing this week. An extended look at the weather for Quail Hollow and the Charlotte area. Looks like they are going to be getting some rain throughout the week, maybe even leading into the tournament. but it looks like some rain might be in the forecast, but definitely a lot of wind, as you can see. Maybe not necessarily sustained, a high amount of sustained winds, but a lot of gusts. Gusts early into the upper 20s, maybe even 30 on Thursday. More gusty winds on Friday. Does look like it calms down a little bit over the weekend on Saturday and Sunday, but cools off quite a bit, as you can see. Highs in the low 70s. So, again, very, very early on in the week. We can't really exploit a wave advantage, especially since this is a no-cut event. There aren't going to be waves per se, PM and AM and whatnot. But a little too early to be thinking about tee times and who might have the better of it. But regardless, looks like players are going to be dealing with a little bit of wind, especially Thursday and Friday. So with that, we'll move to Fantasy National. And I had this in alphabetical order. I need to star Ludwig Aubert again. He has withdrawn. I checked Rob Bolton's Twitter feed quite literally about 5 to 10 minutes before going live, and noticed that Ludwig Aubert had withdrawn. So there are 69 players in the field this week. The 4 players who are not in the field, Martin Trainer, Wesley Bryan, Chad Ramey, they got bumped out due to the Aeon Swing 5. And then Ludwig Aubert withdrew earlier today. So if you see a star, these players are not playing. Okay, with what we just saw with the wind forecast, in the past couple of years, in moderate and windy conditions, your top total performers in moderate and windy conditions: Rory, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Corey Connors, Denny McCarthy, and Matt Fitzpatrick. There's your top 10 in terms of total performance in the wind. With that, we will remove that filter. Another thing we are very confident about, 2 other filters that we are very confident about. Quail Hollow, one of the longest courses on tour, I believe 4th longest in terms of total yardage, 3rd by par. So on long courses, those defined as over 7,400 yards on Fantasy National, your top total performers on long courses in the past 2 years: Max Homa, Akshay Bhatia, Xander, Wyndham Clark, Sungjae, Matt Fitzpatrick, Sahith Theegala, Jordan Spieth, Corey Connors, Chris Kirk, and Rory. And then the other filter that we will be looking at pretty consistently, we did it last night, we'll do it tonight, and there will be some metrics with this filter come Wednesday night with the mixed condition model. Difficult relative to par. Quail Hollow, one of the toughest courses on tour. So when rounds have been difficult relative to par in the past couple of years, top total performers: Rory, Wyndham Clark, Tommy Fleetwood, Will Zalatoris, Xander, Victor Hovland, Patrick Cantlay, Max Homa, Colin Morikawa, and Russell Henley. So again, with the variation, or the 3 different filters that we just looked at, the wind, long courses, difficult, I'm going to emphasize especially the difficult relative to par and the long course filter, those top 10s. I would give those top 10 players in each of those lists a pretty decent boost, as Quail Hollow has been pretty consistent year over year as being one of the most difficult courses, one of the longest courses. There is a reason why it is such a staple in these big events, the PGA Championship, of course hosting the President's Cup, just a standout course. So with that, we're going to remove the filter for now. I'm going to keep it on the last 2 years as we go to looking at some prior leaderboards. And again, As I mentioned in the intro at the beginning of the show, we are going to be looking at only a couple of prior leaderboards, 2023 and 2021. 2022, remember, since Quail Hollow was hosting the President's Cup 2022, the Wells Fargo Championship moved to TPC Potomac. So when you see me throughout this evening skipping over the 2022 year, that's why. So let's take a look at last year's Wells Fargo. We'll highlight the top 17 just due to ties here. You see only one player negative in approach. Wyndham Clark went crazy with the irons, led the field in irons last year. Third, Harris English, but not necessarily as direct correlation as I would have thought. Definitely had a couple of middling finishes here from Ramey and Buckley. Lashley was a top 30. Griot was a top 25. What you do have is your cut making, which again, we don't have to worry about a cut, but it wasn't as direct correlation as I would have thought. We look at off the tee. Again, a lot of cut making, but our winner quite a bit lower in terms of off the tee. It'll play a factor, but how much is certainly to be determined. Around the green, I do think around the green will have some decent amount of effect. But you have a few miscuts up here. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I think around the green would have a small factor. This is one of the courses I do think we're going to look at all four shot types, strokes gained shot types in the mixed condition model. These greens aren't easy to hit, so players are going to have to be able to get up and down from some of these very difficult greens. And then, of course, putting, 8th, 1st, 8th. We do have a miscut from Adam Long pretty high, but other than him and maybe a clunker of a made cut from Justin Suh, pretty darn solid here in terms of upper leaderboard success, which I spent quite a bit last night talking about how I didn't think putting was going to be a big deal. Last year it was. We look at 2021 and Rory's win, or most recent win at Quail Hollow. Again, the top 17 due to ties. One player negative off the tee, one player negative in approach. I still think this is a ball striking course. If we sort on each of them, again, decent amount of correlation, certainly much better than last year's. Johnny Vegas was middling, but third, top 20, top 10, top 20, third, top 30. A miscut from Ryan Brim. He didn't do much else right in 2021, but he was decent off the tee. But a pretty strong correlation here in 2021 off the tee. Approach, second, top 15, top 20. But again, not nearly as correlating as I would have thought. Rory, about maybe 10th or so in terms of the approach. Around the green, cut making, but not a big deal as you see here. A lot of single digit finishes in the putting, other than Hunter Mahan, who's just was a good putter, probably still is, but not playing as much on the PGA Tour. So top 10 winner, top 10, top 15, top 20. Perhaps that's that was my incorrect assessment last night, that putting might be a little bit more than what I was giving it credence to. So with that, we'll take a look at off the tee. We're going to go through each of these shot types. I can see a validation or a valid argument for both of the filters. So let's just go through them both. Your top off the tee players when rounds have been difficult relative to par: Rory, Patrick Cantlay, Cam Young, Victor Hovland, Gary Woodland, Will Zalatoris, Siwoo, Wyndham Clark, Tony Finau, and Sungjae are your top 10 in the past 2 years off the tee when rounds are difficult. I also see a very valid point for taking a look at off the tee on long courses. Again, driver is going to be in these players' hands. They're not going to be able to fairway find themselves around Quail Hollow all that much. Driver is pretty well forced in a lot of these players' hands. So your top off the tee players on long courses the past couple of years: Will Zalatoris, Xander, Victor, Taylor Moore, Tony Finau, Max Homa, Gary Woodland, Stefan Jaeger, Rory, and Patrick Cantlay. So a decent bit of overlap here. I remember Will Zalatoris. I remember Victor Hovland being top 10 on both of these. Rory was top 10 on both of these. I know Woodland was top 10 on both of these. There might have been a couple others. I'm just, again, going off the top of my head. But I'm pretty sure I'm going to use one of these two filters with either or with off the tee. I'm either going to use long courses or I'm going to use the difficult relative par. Just haven't made up my mind yet. So it'd be interesting to hear from the community's sake what you think, or from the community standpoint. Do you think off the tee makes more sense to have the difficult relative par? Do you think it's the long courses? Do you think it's something else? Would be interested. Put it in chat. Put it in the comments. Let's take a closer look at our top approach players. So we're going to look at 2024. Your top approach players in the field this week at the Wells Fargo this calendar year: Tom Hoagie, Corey Connors, Akshay Bhatia, Tony Finau, Shane Lowry, Jake Knapp, Lucas Glover, Siwoo Kim, Will Zalatoris, and Justin Thomas. Strokes gained around the green, you could maybe argue to look at difficult relative to par, but I just think I'm going to look at strokes gained around the green in general from the 2024 season. And if something comes up throughout the rest of this, either the show or my research throughout the week, I'll explain the filter added if I add one come Wednesday night. So your top around the green players: Hideki, Mackenzie Hughes, Stefan Jaeger, Lucas Glover, Alex Noren, Denny McCarthy, Webb Simpson, Taylor Moore, JT Poston, Siwoo Kim, and Tommy Fleetwood. Finally, bear with me as I find the courses that have Poa Trivialis overseed. We're going to start with Harbortown, Innisbrook, Memorial Park, just this past year, but is what it is. It is Poa Trivialis this year. We have Quail Hollow, I believe it's the top one, the Stadium Course, TPC San Antonio, Sawgrass, and Scottsdale. So our top putters the past 2 years on Poa Trivialis overseed. Our top putters: Matt Fitzpatrick, Nick Taylor, Sahith Theegala, Jason Day, Wyndham Clark, Matt Kuchar, Adam Scott, Denny McCarthy, Brian Harmon, and Xander. So give those players a decent little boost as well, considering what we just saw in the prior leaderboards. Putting seems to be a pretty big deal, and these are your best putters the past 2 years on Poa Trivialis. Moving right along to fairways and greens, driving distance, and whatnot. We take a look. Not a whole lot in terms of distance, which might be a tad bit surprising. But with every single player essentially hitting driver on almost all of these par fours, and there are a couple of drivable par fours, there's not a whole lot to be gained with the distance. Brendan Todd's never going to be long. Denny McCarthy's not long. Sung Jae, not necessarily the longest. But even a big hitter like Wyndham Clark, only gaining 26 last year. If we sort, there wasn't a whole lot of correlation in terms of gaining a lot of distance. Rory, very, very, middling. Cameron Young was very poor in terms of, final result. Bramlett, Mitchell, Yeah, you do have Jimmy Walker top 15, Adam Scott a top 5, but a couple of very high missed cuts. Not a whole lot here in terms of distance, which is a little surprising, and I'll show you why when we go to Microsoft Excel, especially for form coming into Quail Hollow, but maybe not necessarily at Quail Hollow. Instead, look at the good drives gained here. You only have 2 players negative in good drives gained. The more I looked at it today, the more I felt pretty darn confident that this is where we wanted to look. However, it is important to note that Wyndham Clark did lead the tournament in greens gained with Stefan Jaeger. But look at that correlation. First, a top 30, 7th, 5th, 8th, 8th. Very, very strong up top. Then got some cut making below it. We sort on the good drives gained. I mean, Wyndham Clark was still very good at it, but not necessarily as correlating as the greens. 7th, 27th, our top 30, a clunker from Ryan Armour, top 10, middling, top 10, top 10. It's okay. It was okay, but I would say in terms of the consistency, it was more probably about the good drives gained, but your top elite finishers, more so in the greens gained, would be my guess. We look at 2021. Fairways and greens. Again, distance, sure, maybe a little bit more of a factor in 2021 than it was last year, but yet you still had several players negative, but much more correlating in terms of elite production in distance. Your winner probably led in distance would be my guess. Second. Yeah, so this is much more correlating in 2021. Top 10, winner, top 5, top 10, top 20. Brandon Hagee, a middling to top 30, depending on your definition of middling, a third. So pretty solid in 2021. But again, my emphasis here, only 1 player negative in good drives gained, and he was only slightly negative in good drives gained. Look at the video game numbers from Rory and Abraham Answer in terms of greens gained. On both of these, they might be the top 2. Corey Connors snuck up there, but second, middling, first, top 10, top 20. So greens and good drives certainly make sense. Depends on what you want to look for. If you want the consistency, I would advocate to look at the good drives gained. If you want the upper echelon finishes, the more volatile statistic, but one that could provide you a sneak peek to a surprising winner, it would probably be greens. So I think we're going to take a look at both of them. And we're going to slice this data up in a couple of different ways. First, we'll take a look at when rounds are difficult. So your top good drives gained players when scoring is difficult relative to par. Colin, Siwoo Kim, Patrick Cantley, Shane Lowry, Sepp Straka, Akshay Bhatia, Victor Hovland, Russell Henley, Brennan Todd, and Tom Kim are your top 10 in terms of good drives gained when it's difficult. Your top greens players, Xander, Morikawa, Finau, Cam Young, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Cantley, Will Zalatoris, Victor Hovland, Gary Woodland, and Sepp Straka. So several of these players top 10 in both. Sepp Straka, Victor Hovland, Cantlay, Colin Morikawa first and second. And certainly several players deserve an honorable mention as well. Xander, probably Finau, top 20 in the good drives gained, third in greens. Will Zalatoris, Tom Kim, 10th and 11th, just missing top 10ing both. Lowry, 4th and 12th, 12th and 13th from Grillo. So several players get an honorable mention, but there's a look at the good drives gained in the greens when scoring is difficult relative to par. And again, just like off the tee, I see a valid argument if you wanted to make one to look at this on long courses. So your top your top good drives gained players on long courses have been Colin Morikawa, Corey Connors, Andrew Putnam, Tony Finau, Shane Lowry, Harris English, Akshay Bhatia, Ben Coles, Lucas Glover, and Emiliano Grillo. Ben Coles, again, take with a slight grain of salt. He's got quite a few less rounds than these other players. He's in here from his Aeon Swing 5 performance, thanks to the Corrales, the Valero, and Puerto Rico especially. He was very, very good there. And your top greens gained players on long courses: Connors, Wyndham Clark, Andrew Putnam, Max Homa, Xander, Tony Finau, Cameron Young, Patrick Rogers, Yeager, and Batia. So it is interesting to note, at least for these greens gained, Wyndham Clark, your defending champion. Max Homa's played very well here. Xander's been pretty darn good here. So it's interesting to note those players. They are more so in the greens gained when looking at long courses, and I think they were more so greens gained when it was difficult as well. The only other thing we could perhaps take a look at, since we have the long course filter on, we'll take a look at driving distance. I'm still not 100% sold that it doesn't matter. Since this course is so long and driver is going to be in your hand, I still think I'm going to probably have some driving distance in the mixed condition model. So when on long courses in the past couple of years, your top driving distance players in the field this week: Rory, Wyndham Clark, Cam Young, Adam Scott, Gary Woodland, Ben On, Justin Thomas, Kevin Tway, Kurt Kitayama, Sam Burns, and Jordan Spieth are your top 10 in terms of driving distance on long courses when they know that they just have to hit it far off the tee. But mostly, I think I'm leaning greens gained. But, it was also pretty telling to see just, how consistent the good drives gained were as well. All right, we're going to move to scoring. Pretty simple what we're going to look at here, but for evidence and to back up my claims here, we're going to look at bogey avoidance. Again, only 2 players negative in terms of birdies gained. And like I said last night, the higher raw numbers are probably in the birdies gained, but the more consistent metric is the bogey avoidance. 1st, 5th, 14th, 2nd, 3rd, 27th, sure. Then you have a lot of elite finishes. But the more consistent metric is in the bogey avoidance. First, your winner led. Did he lead? Yes, well, he led in birdies and bogey avoidance. That's a pretty good combination. 1st, 5th, 14th, 8th, 3rd, 8th in the bogey avoidance. You do have a couple of higher missed cuts in the bogey avoidance. But pars are generally good scores around Quail Hollow, and that's why I am leaning towards the bogey avoidance. You see Rory much more so in the bogey avoidance in 2021. Answer was more in the bogey avoidance. Much more in the bogey avoidance in these 3 as well. In your top 10, not a single player was negative in bogey avoidance. As you move to the top 20, more players were. So, sorting on it, Piercy, you had a couple of, 3 middling finishes here in 2021. Bogey avoidance, look at this. The bogey avoidance is extremely solid, with the exception of Rob Oppenheim, who missed the cut. Extremely solid, minus the missed cut. So, again, I'm leaning towards the bogey avoidance. And this is my preference when you're looking at a scoring metric like birdies gained, bogey avoidance, opportunities. My preference, so long as it makes sense, is to combine it with a scoring filter like easy or difficult. So you won't see me use bogey avoidance on long courses this week. What you're going to see me use is bogey avoidance when scoring is difficult. So, win rounds are difficult. Your top bogey avoiders in the past 2 years: Jason Day, Tommy Fleetwood, Matt Fitzpatrick, Wyndham Clark, Denny McCarthy, Xander, Victor Hovland, Rory, Max Homa, Jordan Spieth. And again, important to see, like Tommy Fleetwood, who's been very good at Quail Hollow, very high in this list. Wyndham Clark, who's been very good here. Xander, Rory, Homa, these guys who have consistently played Quail Hollow and played it well, they are doing very well in bogey avoidance when rounds are difficult. And these are your major champions, sure, but it's always important to just get that extra evidence for you in your thinking. Moving to par threes, I didn't see a whole lot in these last night, and then come to find out, like Wyndham Clark played them pretty well last year. I mean, he wasn't. He was second in the field. It wasn't, elite in terms of a total, or a big total number. He didn't gain 7 or 8 or anything like that, but he did play them well, especially relative to the field. There are 2 par threes that measure to this length, so it does appear like the 175 to 200 would be the range to single out, but I don't think there's enough here to single it out. Instead, if we're going to do anything, it does look like it would be the total par threes. But Wyndham Clark played them well. Denny McCarthy played them well. But you absolutely don't have to. Look, Sung Jae top 10, and he was atrocious at them. They're just not as big of a deal as most courses. Or as some courses, I should say. Like Rory doesn't play them particularly well. And there wasn't a whole lot to be gained on the par threes. Like you have your cut making, but pretty lax otherwise. And again, the emphasis would be on this range of par threes if we're going to split it out. I just don't think we're going to. So just very, very quickly. Oh, we're on the right one. Just very, very quickly. In this calendar year, in 2024, your top par 3 performers: Billy Horschel, Denny McCarthy, Matt Fitzpatrick, Matthew Pavone, Tom Hoagie, Alex Noren, Jake Knapp, Griot, C. Tagala, and Rory. And Adam Schenk, pardon me, he is tied for 10th. I know it says 11th. Again, Obear is withdrawn, so it moves him to 10th. Okay, we're going to move to par 4s, and we saw in Microsoft Excel, this was a big deal last night. And you're going to see it in the prior leaderboard, just a big deal. Not a single player negative all the way down to tied. Everybody in your top 30, technically top 34, positive in par 4s. I mean, 9 and 8 and 9, just a lot here. Oh my gosh. 1st, 5th, 8th, 3rd, 5th, 7th, 8th, 8th, 23rd, 2nd, 8th. Can't get much more direct than that. Just huge, huge. And look at where most of the strokes gained are coming from. 6.3 out of your 9.9, so 2/3 essentially. 6.3, 6.3, a 7.3 down here, 7.3. Most of it coming into the 450 to 500, which makes a lot of sense. 6 of the 11 par 4s fall to that range. You have a 449 yard par 4, so just shy of it. You have to imagine at least one of the days they're going to move a tee or move a pin to make that play into the 450 to 500 bucket. And the 2 par 4s that measure over 500 are at 504 and 506. So like I was just saying, you have to imagine that they're going to be moving some of those tees and pins around, where the 450 to 500 is quite dominant here at Quail Hollow. So I don't know if we should only look at this range, but based on solely 2023, it looks like it might be worthwhile to just look at that. Having said that, there are 2 semi-drivable par 4s here, so you'd be taking a pretty big chance only looking at those. But again, just emphasizing the par 4s and of that length: 11.5, 10.5, 12.5, 9.5, or excuse me, 8.5. Like you sort on it: 3rd, 1st, 2nd, 9th, 18th, 3rd, 5th, 18th, 6th, 11th, 14th. I mean, just direct correlation up and down the leaderboard here on the par 4s. Looking at the 450 to 500, 2nd, 1st, 9th, a little bit less so. You have a couple of middlings here and then some more elite. So a whole lot in these par fours. So I don't think it's correct to just look at this range, but we've definitely seen enough that we're going to separate it out from the other par fours. So first off, your top par four performers, total par four performers in the field at the Wells Fargo this week: Xander, Chris Kirk, Seabez, Peter Malnati, Wyndham Clark, Andrew Putnam, Akshay Bhatia, Brian Harmon, Jason Day, Shane Lowry, and Hideki. But the emphasis will be on the 450 to 5s for sure. So give these players a pretty considerable boost as well. Your top players from 450 to 500, or your top par 4 performers from 450 to 500 yards: Hideki, Bhatia, Rory, Xander, Cantlay, Finau, Wyndham Clark, Kevin Tway, Stefan Jaeger, and Jordan Spieth. And then moving to par 5s, just very, very quickly. They're going to have a decent little bit, sure. Certainly more than the par 3s. But get beyond Wyndham Clark and Xander, pretty lackluster, honestly. Just kind of pretty lackluster. Second, 27th. First, a horrible clunker. And then look at all these missed cuts down here. Just not a whole lot in the par 5s. At least last year there weren't. 2021. Looking at Rory. And Rory generally plays the par 5s pretty darn well. Only a 2.1. Piercy was a 7.1. He probably led. So much more correlating last year. Or excuse me. Much more correlating in 2021 than it was last year. But each of these ranges has quite a bit in it. It looks like it would be the 550 to 600 if we were to look at a range. But I think it's just total par 5s, to be honest with you. And we'll confirm that in Microsoft Excel here shortly. But our top par 5 performers in the field this week: Nick Dunlap, Tony Finau, Will Zalatoris, Justin Thomas, Patrick Cantlay, Schauffele, Mac Hughes, Alex Noren, Hideki, Wyndham Clark, and Kevin Tway. Before I forget, because it was brought up last night, I thought it was quite interesting. I did do a little bit of research today. Let's take a look at some putting. We'll take a look at some 3-putt avoidance, but we looked at the course breakdown, and I believe it was C last night that mentioned how 0 to 5 feet might be something. I kind of think it might be the 5 to 10 feet, and I'll show you why in Microsoft Excel. But let's take a look at a little bit of putting here, especially since, apologies, 3 putts per round are quite common here. You're averaging about 7/10ths of a 3-putt per round. Almost 1 per round. That's pretty high. So let's figure out what we might want to think about in terms of putting, if anything, beyond just strokes gained putting. So looking at last year's leaderboard, 0 to 5 feet, only a couple players negative. Pretty direct, to be honest. 8th, top 20, runner-up, top 10, top 20. Your winner was pretty high. A couple more top 10s. Pretty solid here. 5 to 10 feet. Also kind of solid, with the exception of Adam Hadwin. So I don't know whether we need to look at the individual range, but this is that 3-putt avoidance, the ability to lag putt and to make your 5 to 10 footers, your comebackers, if you will. So I am still torn on whether I want to look at 3-putt avoidance or just try to single out a range. We look at 2021, not necessarily as strong for your top 17 here. You got a few players negative, but 2nd, 6th, some pretty poor performances, sure. Top 20s, and your winner was pretty high in the 0 to 5. A lot more volatile as the 5 and 10. So I don't know. Again, just like what I talked about off the tee, what filter the community thinks, whether that's long course or difficult. I'd also be interested to hear, is this digging in too deep? Should we just look at putting? I'm kind of leaning towards taking a look at 3-putt avoidance, or do you think one of these two ranges matters? Be interested to hear. So, because I'm on the putting tab and I realized I skipped something, so I'll have to go back to it. Looking at some Poa Trivialis Overseed again. Let's find all these courses. Quail Hollow, Stadium Course, TPC San Antonio, Sawgrass, Scottsdale. Take a look at this in a couple of different ways. I'm going to start with 3-putt avoidance. I think that's where I'm at, leaning towards, on a Monday evening. Your top 3-putt avoiders on Poa Trivialis: Seabass, J-Day, Brian Harmon, Eric Cole, Wyndham Clark, Rory, Matt Kuchar, Matt Fitzpatrick, Kurt Kitayama, and Denny McCarthy. Your top putters on Poa Trivialis from 0 to 5 feet: Seabass, Kitayama, McCarthy, J-Day, Fitzpatrick, Ricky Fowler, Rory, Batia, Sam Burns, Mackenzie Hughes, and Tagala. Interesting. All right, I realized that I skipped proximity, so we definitely need to take a look at that just very, very quickly. So, my apologies. We'll have to go back. Gosh dang it, I hit putting. I wanted to go to proximity. Let's take a look at proximity real quick. Majority of the approach shots, because this is a long course, do come from 200 plus, even more so for, still some more from 175 to 200, especially relative to the PGA Tour average. So let's figure out and see if there is a range of proximity that matters. Maybe it's total prox, because looking at last year, total prox was pretty darn solid. I mean, Xander was essentially field average, minus 3.9 for 4 rounds. KH Lee, pretty darn close to field average, or essentially field average. Now, Denny McCarthy was really poor, no doubt about it. But everybody else was, field average or better at total prox. That might be something we want to look at if we sort on it. Webb, clunker of a made cut, but third, first, a couple of other top 10s up here. Decent in terms of total prox. 200 plus, you got your cut making, with the exception of Lipsky, but nothing in terms of elite. And then 2021, looking at prox, much less correlating, or at least much less in terms of success up here. You see quite a few players negative than 200 plus. Cut making, so maybe it's total prox. So in this calendar year, 2024, your top total prox players: Tony Finau, Tom Hoge, Lucas Glover, Seabass, Kurt Kitayama, Corey Connors, Akshay Bhatia, Wyndham Clark, Keegan Bradley, and Jake Knapp. 200 plus, just because so many approach shots come from that length. We'll take a quick look at that. Xander, Connors, Finau, Hoge, Kitayama, Fitz, Lucas Glover, Ben On, Hideki, and Pavone. All right. Let's move to Microsoft Excel. Really dig into Quail Hollow. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the comparison course, and we're really digging into the weeds of the data here for the Wells Fargo. And remember, there's only 3 years of data going back 5 total years. 2020 canceled. 2022 played at a different course. Your shot types, you got a pretty high outlier and a fairly low one. So approach has been pretty volatile. Off the tee, you had one big outlier, so maybe off the tee, not as big, maybe. Around the green's been pretty darn consistent. And the putting's been really good. You've actually got a low outlier here. So perhaps I was mistaken, and perhaps the putting really does contribute a little bit. Driving distance, 1 year it mattered, 2 that it didn't. Pretty inconsistent, but what I can tell you is that good drives gained has been very, very consistent, as I was mentioning. And greens, this is a big number. This is a big number. This is almost major-esque in terms of the greens in regulation gained number. So it might be appropriate to look at both of these. Again, depends on what you want to look at. As a statistician, I value the consistency, so this would lead me to lean towards the good drives gained. But these are some pretty big numbers in greens gained as well, and then in 2019 it really mattered. So hard to say, but I do like seeing the consistency of the good drives gained. But I could envision myself putting both of these into the final mixed condition model. Taking a look at scoring, I mean, this sums it up as best as I can. Generally, you're going to get higher numbers in the birdies gained, particularly at your run-of-the-mill course or especially easy courses. But, the higher raw number even is in the bogey avoidance. So pretty simple. That's why we're going to be focused on the bogey avoidance. Let's take a look at par 3s, 4s, and 5s. Par 3s, 1 year it mattered, or 1 year it really mattered, 1 year it really didn't matter, and then, one that was kind of average. Hard to say. It does look like the 175 to 200 is the most important range, but only a 0.6, not even 50% of the par 3s, and the par 3s are only at a 1.4. Not sure how much we want to do with that. Probably going to look at par 3s. It's going to be very little. On the other hand, look at this massive number in the par 4s. 5.33. That's huge. That's the largest, I believe. I have to double check myself real quick. I don't think there's another 5 even on the PGA Tour. 5.3. Okay, so the Travelers has a 5.13. The 3M's a 5.04. The Wyndham's 5.1. And these courses are like par 70s. I know the Wyndham's a par, or the Sedgefield's a par 70. TPC Twin Cities might be a 70 or 71. Like, this is where these places, par 4s, are really, really emphasized. So the fact that this number is as large as it is at a 5.33, it is indeed the largest on the PGA Tour. Huge. Huge. And then look at the 450 to 5 by itself. 2.81. Massive. A little bit more than 50%, but 2.81 versus all of the par 3s contribute to a 1.4. So the 450 to 500 are double the significance and importance as all of the par 3s. They're double the significance of the par 5s. So we're going to have a huge amount of emphasis in the par 4s and in this. Again, I'm just kind of spitballing numbers here, but I'm thinking maybe like 15 to 20% here, probably 10%, 15% in this. Just huge amounts of emphasis. And you can see the data behind it. And then looking at the par 5s, again, it's only a 1.3. The par 3s were a 1.4, so technically even a little bit more significant. No range to look at. They're, pretty much even in terms of importance. Now, the past couple of times at Quail Hollow, it has been more so the 550 to 600. The 2019 year really bringing this up and that down. But, I mean, there's not a lot to be gained. So we're just going to be looking at par 5s. And then I know the numbers won't seem like much for the proximity, but that's a decently high number, I guess. That's a decently high number with a low outlier. So maybe the 200 plus is a factor that we need to think about, because that is a pretty low outlier. Just out of curiosity, if we scroll over, like even with that low outlier, it's 40% more important than the average PGA Tour event. Prox total is 16% more important. So, okay, maybe 200 plus is something that we want to look at. But there's some, digging into the weeds of the data for Quail Hollow, like digging in deep. The past 3 Wells Fargo championships at Quail Hollow. With that, let's move to the mixed condition model that I made last year. See what I put in there, how good it was in terms of predictability and results. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 missed cuts in my top 20. That's just downright unacceptable. Yes, we don't have to worry about a mixed cut, or we don't have to worry about a missed cut this year, but still, 8 of my top 20 did not play very well at all. So this was not very good in terms of results based. The winner was in the top 30, so it wasn't great, but it wasn't atrocious. I wasn't terribly off. And some of these players did have, strong finishes. Runner-up from Xander, who's, popular. Terrell Hatton. A fairly unique Corey Connors, top 10. That was decent. Sung Jae, top 10. So it was... It has a lot of room for improvement. It was... I can't say it was even okay. It was bad. It just wasn't a disaster. So, what did I look at? A 15% approach makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm still thinking this is a ball striking course, and approach is a big factor for Wyndham and for Rory when they won. So, yeah. 15% in bogey avoidance when it's difficult relative to par. Yeah. I had 15% in greens when it was difficult. And I don't mind the using the filter, but that seems a little too heavy. So I think I would back that percentage off. And as we'll see, it wasn't very predictive either. So this is some percentage that needs to be changed. Definitely lowered. I don't have a problem with greens, using greens when it's difficult, but way too much in percentage. 10% off the tee. Yeah, I didn't use a filter, but that's fine. Yeah, I had Bermuda last year. This was incorrect. Now that we're quite a bit more sophisticated, again, thanks to Gabe for helping me correlate which courses have what surfaces. This is going to be much more sophisticated. So this is almost a throwaway. Because we'll see, it was very, very poor in terms of predictability, but that's because our filter was wrong. So when you have the incorrect filter, it's going to throw off your data. So that's why it's important. That's why I spend so much time talking about filters on data, because if you use the wrong one, it can really throw your results off. 10% in the 450 to 500 par 4s. 10% on the par 5s. I think that's a little bit too heavy. Probably back that off. I did have driving distance on long courses. Interesting. I looked at scrambling. I think for me, I'm probably just going to stick to around the green, but you could absolutely look at scrambling as well. And then only 5% par 4s. That's a mistake. That needs to rise as well. So how predictive were these? There were 150 players, 151 in the field last year, so I would have accepted anything in the low to mid 50s. Approach, extremely predictive. Bogey avoidance, extremely predictive. The greens were not. You off the tee wasn't, surprisingly. Other things that were pretty predictive: the par 5s, a 44, that's pretty strong. Scrambling at a 50 is okay. Right off your screen. Scrambling at a 50 is okay, so I would think I'm just going to use the around the green, but I could be talked into scrambling. I'll probably reach out to Gabe again tomorrow, figure out where he and I, how we see Quail Hollow playing, and finalize mixed condition models tomorrow and Wednesday. And then the par 4s were pretty darn predictive, so it was just an outright error to only have 5% there. That really needs to rise. So clearly a lot to modify from last year's mixed condition model, and to try and make it better this year. So with that, now we'll move to, let me save that. Actually, I'm just going to close that. Now we'll move to the early look file. Now that we have a strong idea of the metrics that play well here at Quail Hollow, let's see in those 3 years, 2019, 21, and 23, who has done the best at those particular metrics. So I'm not going to do everything on the strokes gained. Let's just look at approach. I will do putting as well. So your top approach players at Quail Hollow in those 3 years, Ramey only one time. Griot has hit his approach as well. Connors, there's Woodland. Surprisingly, Morikawa he did not play well, but you can see he did Colin Morikawa things. He gained quite a bit with the irons and lost everything on the greens. So typical Colin Morikawa. JT, Rory has been very good with the irons. Xander, Tommy, Max Homa, a little bit less in terms of success, but he's hit his irons well and he's putt very well on this or at this course. There's Seamus Power 3 for 3. English is 3 for 3. Nick Taylor 2 for 2. Wyndham Clark. Wyndham Clark's just been good at everything. Not been great at anything, but just been good at everything. So take that for what you will. Shank, a little bit okay in the irons as well. We definitely want to look at putting. Let's do that. Your top putters, 3 years at Quail Hollow. Brendan Todd, who's played extremely well. He's probably the outlier because look at, absolutely no distance. He's been okay with the irons. Okay, I thought he was more like his off the tee and terrible with the irons, but he's actually been okay with the irons. So, but you cannot expect him to gain 9 every single tournament. So, be a little bit cautious with that. English has putt well here in 3 tries. Max Homa putt well. Xander. McCarthy makes a lot of sense. He's an all-world putter, but you see the lack of successes he's had here. Ricky's putt okay here. Harmon. Shank's putt pretty well. Hadwin's putt pretty well, but absolutely no results to speak of. Sungjae. Fleetwood. Seamus. Victor's even putt well here. So there's some of your top putters. Let's look at, again, I'm gonna stick with the good drives game. This very well could be the greens that we need to look at, but I'm just gonna look at the good drives. Corey Connors, Xander again, Kitayama and Morikawa were okay with the good drives game, but man, they were really bad performance-wise. Keegan, okay, interesting. Wyndham Clark, Brendan Todd, Webb, Tommy Fleetwood, Griot, Thomas, Hoagie and Yeager a little bit further down, but very little success. Let's go to bogey avoidance. We know that's going to absolutely matter. So our top bogey avoiders at Quail Hollow. Gosh dang it. Brendan Todd. So that's probably contributing to a lot of his rise on the leaderboards as he's been avoiding bogeys very, very well. Griot, Fowler, Rory, Fleetwood, Harmon, Clark, Homa, Corey Connors, and a big drop-off. Look at that. A big drop-off. Don't forget, Justin Rose has only played 1 time, so that's why he's such far and away above everybody else. But 5 to a 3.7, that's pretty close. Pretty good cluster there, and then a big drop-off down to Keegan and then Jay Day and Harris English. So these guys especially have been elite bogey avoiders at Quail Hollow. Let's look at par 4s and probably 450 to 500s. We'll skip the 3s. We'll probably skip the 5s because we're running a little long on time, and I do want to show you all some of the research from today. Top par 4 performers. There's Tommy. Look, 2 for 2, average finish inside the top 10 or 10th. I should say. So, huge in that. Brendan Todd been playing the par 4s very well. Gary Woodland, Rory, Xander, Ricky, Griot, Hovland, Homa, Clark, Harris English, Connors, Thomas, Cantley, a little bit less in terms of success here, but played the par 4 as well. 450 to 5. Par 4s. Only 1 time, Tom Kim, Brendan Todd again, Corey Connors, Rory, Tommy Fleetwood, Griot, Justin Thomas, Wyndham Clark, Gary Woodland, Fowler, Homa, Xander, Webb Simpson. Like, look at all these players who have averaged elite finishes, averaged 15, top 15, averaged the top 20 with a win, averaged the top 10, averaged the top 20, averaged the top 20. They are taking advantage, or they're playing very well on these par fours, 450 to 500. Every part of me thinks I should look at total procs, but let's look at 200 plus, just considering that the data show that it was actually a fairly big number. Webb, Harmon, Poston, a lot less in terms of success. This doesn't feel like a good JT Poston course. Justin Thomas, Connors, Keegan, Max Homa, Cameron Davis, Todd, Griot. Only because these players haven't had the elite finishes. I'm going to sort on the total procs. Let's see if that clears it up a little bit. Because if we get those players like Xander and Tommy and Rory and those players up there, Griot, Hovland, Rory, Webb a little bit less, Woodland, Connors, Brendan Todd, okay, that probably might be the tiebreaker. It might be total procs. Yeah, 200 plus does seem, but like, look at these players. Yes, they've been doing pretty well at the total procs. A lot of that probably is coming in the 200 plus as well. But they've been good at all of these ranges. So I'm starting to lean towards the total procs as opposed to the 200 plus. Let me sort this on best average finish, and we're going to round the show out with taking a look at some of the research that went into what I posted on social media earlier today. So first thing I want to show you, let's just do the winner matrix really, really quickly because there's so few years. Not a lot to show here. And while Quail Hollow has been a pretty darn predictive course, like, Wyndham Clark didn't have a whole lot of success. Now, Rory has loved Quail Hollow. I mean, won in 2015, won in 2021. Look at all these elite performances. He just loves Quail Hollow. But Max Homa, made the cut to a clunker in 2015, didn't play it for 2 years, and then wins. Jason Day wins in 2018. He didn't play it for a while. So, elite performances at Quail Hollow isn't necessarily mandatory, but part of what I listed on social media earlier today is that they at least made the cut in their previous attempt. It didn't have to be the previous year, but they at least made the cut in their previous attempt. There is some amount of success, or at least an amount of familiarity with Quail Hollow before a player has won, going back to 2018. I only go back to 2016 because of the big renovation that happened. So 2016, Wells Fargo gets played. They shut the course down, renovated it to get ready for the PGA Championship. 2017 is played at Eagle Point because Quail Hollow hosted the PGA. Then we have 2018, 2019, 2020 canceled, 2021, and 2023. So not a whole lot to go on, but again, these winners have had at least a modicum of success. They at least made the cut their previous trip to Quail Hollow for the Wells Fargo. Again, I didn't bring in the 2017 PGA Championship. But the more telling thing, I think, let's take a look at the form of these winners leading into their win at the Wells Fargo. The color coding, blue is on a long course that defined as over 7,400 yards. This light green is the match of Poa Trivialis, so Harbor Town, Innisbrook, TPC Sawgrass, TPC Scottsdale. That's what this light green is designating, is that it matches the green surface. And then red is difficult. The tournament was considered difficult. And that definition to me is that at least two rounds played difficult and no round played easy. So you could have difficult, average, difficult, 3 rounds difficult, whatever. So these tournaments were labeled difficult. Let's take a look. Wyndham Clark, very, very solid. The start of his coming out tour, if you will. The start of him playing some really, really good golf. Getting into big game Wyndham now almost. But top 5 difficult, top 35 difficult. So a little bit there, maybe a little bit. Look at the long course, top 10, top 25, other good performances, so solid. And he had been putting well. But he's a little bit of an outlier because Rory did not make a single putt at the Players. Missed the cut. Was field average with waste management. So it clearly isn't the putting. You look at Max Homa. He was really bad at the Valero the time before on this same type surface. So it wasn't the putting. Was it difficult? Well, Rory missed the cut. He did top 10 the API. Missed the cut from Max Homa in 2019 at the Valspar, then top 20. So, of the players who did play a difficult tournament, you see J-Day didn't play a tournament that was considered difficult in 2018. Of the players who played a difficult tournament, you had a top 5, you had a top 10, and you had a top 20. So, they at least had some amount of performance when it was difficult, but I think the more telling thing is when it was on long courses. Top 10, top 25, you had 2 top 10s here and another top 20. Max Homa maybe a slight outlier there. And then J-Day, top 20, top 25, and a win on a long course. So it looks like the long course might be, at least in terms of form, what you might want to look at. And if we come back over here, I say that because the reason why I think driving distance might have something, be in the mixed condition model come Wednesday night. Remember that the blue was designating a long course. Every single round, or tournament, every single tournament was positive in driving distance. Every single champion, every single tournament was positive in driving distance. So when driver was forced in their hands, they were still gaining distance on their opponents on long courses. Maybe that's coincidence, but you would expect maybe a round or a tournament or two that a player is negative. Every single tournament positive in distance on long courses. So there's what led to what I posted for research, plus that little nugget about driving distance. That's going to do it for the show this evening. Thanks to Awaken for jumping in chat. It was good to see you again. Thanks to everyone else out there who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel, by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. Love what I do. Being a masochist, digging really deep into the data, being a nerd, but giving you a statistician and data analyst's view of what he sees, trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. Don't forget, this is a double tournament week, so I will be live tomorrow night for the full show. Research, data, whatever little data there is, because it is the inaugural Myrtle Beach Classic. So we have the research, the data, and the DFS all in one show tomorrow night for the alternate field event, the Myrtle Beach Classic. I hope to see you there tomorrow night, and then be on the lookout tomorrow as I will try to post something around the Myrtle Beach Classic as I do a little bit of research around the course tomorrow morning. Try to put something out on social media. But thanks for all the support. I always appreciate it. For all the wagers you've made so far this week for the Wells Fargo, for all the wagers you're thinking about making this week for the Wells Fargo, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Myrtle Beach full show, may all your bets be profitable.